Hello, my name is Muriel Gerhardt, and I'm going to share some of my short stories about my life with you. Uh, they're a series of vignettes which I'd like to share with my family and my friends. The vignette I'm going to read to you is called So Will I, Mams'elle. Muriel just sat there at the piano in the living room. She was looking at some sheet music, but not really looking or seeing anything in particular. She just sat there with her memories. Flipping through the stack of music, she spotted an old song. She took out the yellowed pages and looked at the lyrics. She could play that song easily in her head. And there she was, humming and then singing out loud in the living room. She could not remember who it was who so aptly described this song, a song that inspired remembering. No, it was not only remembering, it was much, much more. The song made her feel young again, romantic again, in love again. The song was called Mams'elle. And suddenly the words jumped out at her as she sang, "A small cafe, Mams'elle, a rendezvous, Mams'elle. The violins were warm and sweet, and so were you, Mams'elle. And as the night danced by, a kiss became a sigh. Your lovely eyes seemed to sparkle just like wine does. No heart ever yearned the way that mine does for you. And yet I know too well someday you'll say goodbye. Then violins will cry, and so will I, Mams'elle." She could not help herself, nor did she want to help herself. There are so few moments in one's life when emotions such as love and desire spring forth, when one experiences the strange urge to reach forward and embrace someone close, so close to you. And this was such a moment, real or unreal. Here it was, and she was enthralled. The music danced in her head. She was back in that cafe. She was Zeldy, 22 years old. No, not in Paris, but in good old Greenwich Village, in good old New York City. He had taken her there for dinner. His name was Norman. She closed her eyes and then opened them as if she were turning the pages of a photograph album. She met his smiling, deep brown eyes and the long lashes. One did not think of men having long lashes, but his smile, his engaging, enticing smile, and his appraisal of you through those long lashes, those were mesmerizing. He was saying it all without a single word, with just a glance, a very seductive glance, as he reached across the table for her hand. The message was, "Come closer, come closer. Meet my admiring glance, for I'm falling in love with you and hoping that you're falling in love with me." And he was, and she knew that she was. Muriel sat at the piano. The background music of Mams'elle continued to fill her head. At that moment, she knew that Mams'elle would always trigger this moment, would always paint these pictures in her head, would always represent the feelings they had for each other, feelings that would never die. The music played on in her head. Music, it was music that ruled his life. She could see his long, slender fingers race along the keys of the Steinway piano in Steinway Hall, where they met each Friday night as he created the magic of the spheres. It reminded her of her mother. May, her mother, was a concert pianist, and Zeldy remembered how May played each night until her little girl finally fell asleep. Faces. She sees faces. Mama's face and Norman's face. Faces in harmony. Faces resonating beauty and love, determined to share their music with the world. Norman was proud of being a Juilliard student. It took real courage to be accepted there. It took real talent to be accepted there. He had great plans to be a concert pianist and a composer. He was enticing. He was exciting. Sitting in the cafe waiting for the food, Zelda looked away from Norman's fingers. Oh, she thought, for God's sakes. No, for your sake, be a realist. Do you really want to spend your life living in some attic as he tries to reach for the stars? Zelda looked back at Norman's hands. The light reflected off the water glass and looked like little stars. It was as if there were stars on his hands already. But damn it, I could really be in love with him. He excites me, he invites me, and his talent is real. Zelda smiled to herself. What are you thinking? Norman asked. Oh, nothing, she said. She smiled as she cautioned herself. Think further. Give this time, or... She had met Norman at her cousin Ida's wedding in Manhattan. They had left together and went walking in Central Park. Zelda was wearing a form-fitting black dress that had a beaded rose on one side and black spike heels that were digging into the grass. As they walked up the hill, the heels became embedded in the grass, and she found herself falling. But there was Sir Galahad, arms around her to the rescue. Let's do it again, he said, as his eyes laughed and his arms held her close. So easy to kiss. And they did. Muriel sat at the piano. The music drew to a close in her head. Someday had come, and they said goodbye. She had given it much thought. She was so determined not to take any chances or gamble with an uncertain future. No attics for her. No unfulfilled dreams. Well, Mams'elle, who knows what could have been? So here she is. She sits in her comfortable house. No gambles, no chancy chances. But she cannot help wondering, whatever happened to him? Did his dreams come true? Did he find someone to love who loved him in return? What she cannot erase, what persists, what remains are those deep brown smiling eyes and those long brown lashes. There he is, sitting across the table from her, adjusting the flickering candle, his hands reaching for hers. She adjusts the piece of music as she sits at her piano. She nods her head as she tries to sing the final lines. The violins will cry, and so will I, Mams'elle. She lifts her hands from the piano, leans forward, and kisses her long-lost lover. I hope you enjoyed Mams'elle. Thank you, and good night.